You might have come across a state where you want to send the data from the child to the parent in your Angular application. And if you are still using this kind of statement to send the data using output event emitter, then I think you should change to signal outputs. And if your application is signal based, then the signal outputs is a must have. So in this video, we'll be looking at what is the difference between the at output and the signal outputs. And we'll also be looking at the RxJS Interop by the end of this video. So let's start. So as I mentioned, look at this code. This sends the data which is called card selected from this child component to the parent component, which is called post list over here. So whenever there is a click event on these elements, the root element, okay, so what I'm doing over here is that I'm just sending a data that this card is selected by emitting this particular value, right, which is a string type. Okay, so I'm emitting this event from the child to the parent. Okay, now if you see this, it has a lot of boilerplate code. Also, it has the imports. If you see, we have multiple imports, which is called EventEmitter and the output, right? And these imports are not required. So you can omit these imports if you're using signal outputs. Okay. So let's change this kind of block of statements from the output EventEmitter to the signal outputs. So what I'll do, I'll just remove all of these. Okay. So card selector is the event that I want to emit from the postcard. But this should not be used with the event emitter. Instead, it should use the output. Okay. Now, if you see, we have the output that is coming from the @Angular core, and this output is the same thing that we want over here, right? So to pass the data from this parent component, which is called postcard, into the post list component, which is called the parent component. Okay. Now this child component sends the data. This poster 001, which is basically a dummy event or the dummy data that I want to pass from this child component. Okay, now to pass a data, right, for using the signal outputs, you should define what type of data you want to pass. Okay, so I'll define here string. Okay, and now if you can see the error is gone. Now how to pass the event using the signal outputs? You can use the same thing that you have been using the output event emitter. Okay, which is called emit. And there is another method which is called the subscribe, but this subscribe is not used over here if you want to send the data. Okay, so if you want to send the data, you should use the emit function over here. Okay, so once I have emitted the data, how do you subscribe to that? The same way as we used to have using the event emitter. Okay, the output event emitter, right, the card selected. Okay, now this will be again output. Okay, which is our output event, which is being passed from the child component. You can just handle that output event using a method or whatever you add over here, right? So I'm handling that using a method called onCardSelected. Okay, now on the onCardSelected, I'm just consoling whatever the user has sent from the postcard component to this parent component, which is called post list. Okay, now one thing to remember is that the output that I have used over here is not actually a signal output. Okay, so this is just a dispatcher. What I mean is that you cannot do this. Let's say I cannot this.card selected and I cannot do this because this is not a signal. Okay, so if you see over here, this is output emitter reference. Okay, so this hasn't any call signatures, right? So we should not call, and this is not a signal. And this is not a state to have or to store a value. This acts as just a dispatcher. Okay. Now, if you still want to use the observables with the signal outputs, there is an option, right? Angular provides us this option. So if you see, I have that example over here. I have the child component, right? And within the child component, I am just adding the event emitter from here. This event emitter is again the output from the observable. Now observable is again any kind of observable that you have inside your child component. Okay, now here this is my observable, which is interval. Okay, this interval is the package or the operator that is coming from the RxJS package. Now this using this interval, this creates an observable. Okay, now from this observable I can pass the output, the signal output from here, right? So this is coming from the RxJS Interop. Okay, now what this does is that if you see the actual code, now the use of this is that it declares an Angular output that is using an RxJS observable as a source, right? So here in this case, our observable, the interval is a source observable, okay, and we want to create a signal output from that observable. So you can use this output from observable, okay. So it behaves like this: whenever there is a change into this interval, okay, whenever there is a new stream of data into this observable, that is emitted from this observable into this output, okay. So this output will emit this data from the child to the parent, right? So how can you get the data which is being emitted from the child component to the parent using this output from observable, right? So whenever there is a change into this observable, this output event will be emitting that data, actual data, the observable, right, data, and that data should be used into the parent component, okay. If I go to the parent component, now if you see into the parent.html, I haven't subscribed to the output event over here, right? Though no, the output event is not being handled into this parent.html, right? But that is handled inside this parent.ts file, right? Where after my parent components view is initiated, let's say the child components also view is initiated, we get that data into after view unit, right? That, so we'll implement the after view unit over here, okay. So after implementing the after view unit, we can use the view child. This view child is again the new way of adding the view child to your component, okay. So I have added the timer. Now again this timer is again a child component, which is the child component, right, where this child component is like this app.child, okay. So if I go to that parent component and I can directly rename it to the child, okay. Now this child event is called our child component, okay. So instead of having it as a timer, because this is a child component, so I can use the child over here, okay, or I can also use the child component, okay. So that comes as a child component instance over here. So this child component inside this ng after view unit, what we can do, we can directly call that child component over here dot tick. Now again here we are doing the outputToObservable. outputToObservable means that you can create the output event, or you can change the output signal outputs into this observable, right? So from there we are just sending the signal outputs, okay, and into the parent we are just changing that signal outputs into the observable, okay. So this tick is again our observable, okay. So what this will do, it will directly call the tick method, or it will directly use the tick output reference from the child, okay. So whenever there is a event emitter from the child component, so this tick will have all the latest data which is emitted from the child component, okay. So after creating this observable, I can subscribe to that observable, okay, like this, okay. So here I'm just taking the 3 number of data from the child components observable by using the take operator, okay. So let's say I'm sending the data. This interval will send the data after every 1 second of interval, okay. As soon as it sends the 3 number of data to this parent component, so this will be unsubscribed automatically, okay. So if I go into the browser and if I refresh this screen, and if I open this console, okay, right here, okay, let me refresh the screen. So if you see, we have this the tick received inside parent, which is 0, 1 and 2, which is number of times that we receive into the parent, right? That's why we have used the take operator, okay. This take operator will only take the number of data where we have been passing from this child component, okay. So that was all about the difference between the at output and the signal output. Now let's put all this together. With the signal outputs, we get the fewer imports. There is no manual subscription, okay, and there is no complicated decision tree, right? And the boilerplate that we have shown over here, right, to add the event emitter and the at output decorator, right? All that we do not need, right? We only need the signal output, which is the output, right? Because we only want to send the data, right? That's our main purpose, right? So we do not need to store any data, or we do not need to call that signal output over here inside this child component, right? This should only work as a dispatcher. This should only send the data from the child to the component. That's it. So that is why we need these signal outputs, right, to remove all that boilerplate code or to remove all that imports, right? If you haven't watched the signal output video, you can directly click on the info icon on this top of this video and like the video and subscribe to the Frontend code. See you in the next one.